Families of Israelis kidnapped by Hamas have expressed their anger after meeting the Israeli war cabinet in Tel Aviv, arguing that retrieving their loved ones should be prioritized over the mission to destroy Hamas. The Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has insisted that the more the enemy is weakened, the greater the chances of bringing home the hostages.
I went in with one single question, to know if all of the war cabinet supports the same stand that Gantz and Eisenkot took a couple of days ago when they met with us, when they said absolutely clear, without hesitation, that bringing out the hostages is the top priority as far as they're concerned. And now when we've met with the entire cabinet, what we've heard is that taking down Hamas and bringing the hostages are as important, are equally important. As far as I am concerned, and I represent myself and my family, this is incredibly disappointing, because I feel that at this point, when we know that taking down Hamas, we keep hearing from them, is going to take months or years, and it's going to take a long time. On the other hand, the other objective is time sensitive. People are dying. We know that for sure. And as the other goal is time sensitive, and we're talking about people's lives, then we all feel, especially when we're talking about our families, that this should be the top priority.
Well, for more on the conflict, let's speak to Arise Middle East analyst Dr. Saul Zadka, who's monitoring developments from London. Good to see you, Dr. Zadka. We'll talk about the relatives of the hostages in a moment, but from what you're hearing, does it appear as if an agreement is reasonably close to be announced for the release of the hostages in Gaza?
It looks to me that the deal is just around the corner. It could have been sabotaged by unexpected events. For example, the old grandson of Hamas political leader who is based in Qatar has been assassinated by the Israelis today in Gaza. The deputy head of the military branch of Hamas in Lebanon has been also assassinated today alongside 3 more operatives. But it seems to me that both sides are interested to implement what has been hatched by all the protagonists, including the head of the Red Cross, who met Mr. Haniya, the head of Hamas political department in Qatar yesterday, the Americans, the Egyptians, and certainly the Israelis and Hamas itself. So the key is going to be a day of humanitarian pause for every 10 Israeli hostages. 3 days of such a pause from fighting, would mean about 30 to 40 hostages. If Hamas is willing to release more, the Israelis would refrain from renewing the fighting for at least another 2 days. However, this kind of a temporary ceasefire would be implemented 6 hours every day. It looks as if Hamas wants to get the women and the children out of the way, to leave space for the second part of the negotiation, in which they would be releasing soldiers in exchange of those terrorists who are kept in Israeli prisons and have blood on their hands.
Very interesting. And you mentioned the fact that obviously women and children are being considered. Is it on both sides? I mean, will women and children also be released who are being held, Palestinians held in Israeli prisons?
Yeah, and this is the second key of the deal. 3 Palestinian prisoners, mostly women and children, would be released for a single Israeli hostage, and this would be 1 to 3. You may wonder why Hamas would be willing to have such a deal when in 2011 they got 1,000 prisoners in exchange of 1 soldier. And I think that it reflects the fact that Hamas is under heavy military pressure, because they need this kind of process in which humanitarian aid would be coming into Gaza from Egypt. So they would definitely be happy to remove an obstacle that may have some burden on their efforts to keep all the prisoners alive, which means releasing the children and the women. But the Hamas people in Gaza are still holding the cards very close to their chest. They are not releasing a list, and they will decide who among the women and the children would be part of this deal.
So basically promising signs, but nothing confirmed yet. Meanwhile, in Israel itself, there have been some pretty testy exchanges between relatives of the hostages and members of the Prime Minister's war cabinet.
There is a huge, very ugly confrontation between the families and the government. The families do not trust the Prime Minister. They understood after meeting him yesterday that there is a distinction between him and the other two former chief of staffs, members of the opposition, who joined the war cabinet 5 weeks ago. The latter told them, the release of the hostages, the release of your loved ones will take a priority, while the Prime Minister and some of his political colleagues think that Israel should carry on intensifying attacks on Hamas in order to reach a better deal with the organization.
And meanwhile, of course, the fighting continuing in Gaza, hospitals still being attacked and besieged, and civilians still getting killed. I mean, you mentioned the number of people who were also killed just recently. Could these talks be derailed or scuppered by such incidents, even as hopes of a deal are increasing?
It looks as if that nothing would sabotage the deal, because both sides are very keen to have a positive conclusion to it, at least at that stage. However, the Israelis had some kind of good news after they discovered a network of tunnels under Shifa Hospital. They are still not telling us exactly what they found behind this famous concrete wall that separated the tunnel from the hospital, but it could be that they will be able to save their face by showing to the outside world that Hamas did keep a center of command and control under the hospital. At the same time, we don't really know, when we examine the statistics of the Palestinian casualties in Gaza, how many of them are Hamas people, how many of them are children and women, and how many of them were killed by fellow Palestinians as a result of failed firing of rockets into Israel.
Dr. Zadka, thank you very much indeed. Dr. Saul Zadka is a RISE Middle East analyst who was talking to me there from London.